Some more Isaiah today, and we're doing chapters 11 to 14. This is really doubling down now on this whole prediction of Jesus part. I have been Googling this, admittedly, just to double check, because earlier I thought they were the predictions of Jesus, and it turns out I don't think that was. So checking as I go along so I don't spend too long on the wrong track and have to correct later. But indeed, this stuff is genuinely supposed to be about Jesus if you're a Christian, or at least Christians believe that this is very much talking about Jesus. Isaiah comes along and he predicts a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Not exactly romantic metaphorical language, but if you recall, Jesse was the father of King David, so Jesus is supposed to be descended from King David, so they just seem to be hoofing it up a generation to Jesse for some reason. And he talks about this offshoot person will bear fruit, the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, and he will judge with righteousness. So yeah, Jesus then, basically. It talks about a time when the wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, and presumably we're not talking very, very briefly before they eat each other. It even goes on to say that children will be able to play near a cobra's den and put their hand in a viper's nest. Not sure why you'd want to do that anyway, but clearly seems to be getting at that there's going to be a time where all the bad stuff in the world isn't going to be a thing anymore. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's the sort of heaven idea or something, but it's definitely not talking about in another place. It does seem to be here. This is going to be the case. It talks about nations will rally to his descendants to the descendants of Jesse, so this Jesus chap again, and his resting place will be glorious. That gets confusing because it all seems like, yeah, okay, this is really spooky, and then you get to his resting place. So is that a metaphorical resting place, as in the death of Jesus is the pivotal event for Christians and that is sort of their resting place in a non-place sort of thing, I think. I assume it doesn't mean his tomb. So as in the idea was that he would come along, he would die, and it would be a shrine or something where he died. But you suddenly got that sort of ambiguity coming back in again, and it's like, okay, it's difficult to know what to do with that. It talks about in that day, so this point at which you can put your hand in a viper's nest, it says that God will reach out a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people. And he's talking about, well, he seems to be talking about Assyria here, but he also mentions Egypt. And then this begs the question, so a second time would seem to be a reference back to the Exodus. So God gets his people out of Egypt was the Exodus. And it feels like it's suggesting that this Jesus chap is going to be some sort of trigger to a second Exodus. Because I guess that hasn't gone really well. To be fair, it hasn't gone really well because the Israelites were complete punks, weren't they? So it didn't really go very well. God got them out and then they didn't hold up their end of the bargain, despite it being relatively simple. So, yeah, so it sounds like he's going to do it a second time. But on the basis that we know that Jesus dies and that his death is the catalyst for things changing into Christianity, whatever capacity that is that suggesting that because the Israelites mucked it up the first time, now Jesus is coming to go and do it himself? He's saying, you need a job doing properly, do it yourself, or send your son, or if you're a being that's split into several parts as a single being, we'll deal with that later, then yeah, so Jesus dies, and that death would seem to be this second Exodus, and as in it's not a geographical leaving of a place, it's something in Jesus' death is like an Exodus from it's hard, isn't it? But it's a really interesting idea, and I don't know why it's now as well. That's a difficult part in this. Why now? I mean, not that I should necessarily understand it, because if God's decided this, then it would make sense that I don't get it. That part actually includes a reference to the drying up of the Euphrates River, basically so people can walk across. I did Google this, and it doesn't seem to have happened, but there is predictions that it could be dried up within the next 20 years because of man-made reasons and climate change, that sort of thing, and damming and whatever. The damming is in a dam in a river, not damnation, So well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's natural causes, not natural causes, human causes that are going to cause that. But there's that question of the 10 plagues of Egypt that could quite easily have had naturalistic explanations, and there's no reason why God couldn't use naturalistic things or just be predicting that it was going to happen anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of people who predict things, don't they? And when the trouble kicked off in Israel, again, there's a lot of people predicting that that was going to be the beginning of the end times, and the Euphrates drying up, I assume, will be another catalyst for that, assuming it does. People say, oh, it's the end times, this was predicted in Isaiah. It's so hard to do that, though, isn't it? Because extrapolating anything from thousands of years ago to fit here, none of it quite gels, or doesn't seem to obviously gel, like the resting place of Jesus being a special place or whatever, or a place that will be glorious. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the problem with metaphor, isn't it? If you go too deep into metaphor, there's so many different ways you could translate it, so you clearly have to be careful. In chapter 12, it talks about the Holy One of Israel among you. The Holy One, I'm pretty sure, I don't think Moses was ever referred to as a Holy One. In fact, actually, bear with me a second, I'm just going to quickly check that. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the internet is not clear. There's a suggestion that yes, he was holy because he had to remove his sandals because he was in a holy place, but that's because God was in a burning bush talking to him and said that he was in a holy place, not that he was holy. So, and Moses wasn't allowed into the promised land because he sinned. So I think it's fair to say that Moses wasn't referred to as holy. So in this instance, we're talking about the Holy One of Israel among you. Does seem to be a new thing, which would suggest holy would suggest God, surely. So again, that would seem to suggest that Jesus is going to be more than just another prophet. In chapter 13, there's a prediction of the demise of Babylon. This gets very confusing, this Babylon thing, because there's Persia in the mix here, but as far as I understand it, Persia is the overarching conqueror, as it were. But then Assyria and Babylon seem to refer to it almost interchangeably, and I don't quite get the difference. I don't think I care about the difference either, to be perfectly honest, but it's just something worth noting as we go along. Chapter 14 talks about God once again having compassion on Israel and is going to settle them back in their own land. I'm not sure if this is just a reference to after the Babylonian exile, 40,000 were allowed back into Jerusalem to rebuild it. I guess there'll be people who suggest it was it 1948 when Israel became a country again after the Second World War. I think people were suggesting that that was a fulfilment of that prediction, but that's what I mean. Was it 5 minutes later when they went back to Jerusalem, or was it 2,000 years later when Israel became a country again? I don't know. It also about foreigners will join them and unite, which is interesting because I guess from a Christian perspective, Judaism should have ended Jesus' crucifixion on the basis that Judaism, as in an ism of the people of the land of Judah, suddenly, as I understand it, the Israelites were sort of God's holy people, but then it was after Jesus died, it expanded to everybody. So an ism of the people of Judah became the whole world. So Judaism in theory shouldn't exist from a Christian perspective after the death of Jesus. But I can't tell if that's what that's saying, again, because the metaphorical thing is very difficult to put into sort of tangible, specific terms. And finally, there's a quote, rule over oppressors for this Jesus chap. And my understanding is that one of the reasons Judaism rejects Jesus as the Messiah is because what they were expecting was a sort of Jean-Claude Van Damme-esque butt kicker who was going to come in and just kick the crap out of the Romans and everybody else. And Jesus did quite the opposite. So, yeah, I mean, you can sort of see where they're coming from with quotes like that, rule over the oppressors, and that's not what Jesus did. Well, I suppose in a Christian context they would argue that is what he does, but it doesn't, not in a way that sounds like, if you see what I mean. So yeah, it's really hard, this stuff. It's it's clearly, you can see why people are linking that with Jesus, and it sort of fits if you take some of it metaphorically, like the resting place of Jesus is the cross, and the cross is what saves stuff, so it's not a place. But anyway, we know God is not above talking in those terms either, so yeah, it's really difficult to know what to do with. But either way, it is quite remarkable how well it does fit with the Christian interpretation of things. But we should go on anyway and see what else we can find next.